The city's ruined. The rain falls from the sky as screams and havoc is raised in the distance. This isn't Dead by Daylight, but this is Raccoon City and the RPD. Rebecca Chambers, Ada Wong, and Albert Wesker.
I'll kill you quickly. You will not live to see the dawn.
This is a deep dive in Dead by Daylight, Resident Evil Project W.
Dead by Daylight.
We're going to deep dive into the different parts and DLC content of Project W from Resident Evil into Dead by Daylight. We're going to look at a number of things that's been provided, sold, and included in the new update for Dead by Daylight in the 6.2.2 version. Let's take a look at the characters, their models, their skins, voice lines, and also other things that are included in Project W. The first thing we can look at is the character origins. Let's start with Rebecca Chambers. Versus the Resident Evil canon of Rebecca Chambers, Rebecca actually was part of Bravo team sent in Resident Evil 0 to investigate the grisly murders that were occurring in the mountains of Ark. As part of Bravo team, unfortunately most of them ended up being wiped out by the different abominations and monsters that were created by the T-Virus. Rebecca Chambers survived with convict Billy Cohen that was wrongfully convicted of killing people in the village during his tour in the military. Unfortunately, there's not much more information about that. Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen then worked together in order to get off an abandoned train and eventually into a training facility which leads them into the forest, which is where they depart. And Rebecca Chambers continues forward in the Spencer Mansion into the events of Resident Evil, the original, and Resident Evil 1. Rebecca actually survived that into the Resident Evil canon based on the events that unfolded, and she ends up being very close with Chris Redfield, who ends up finding her in the Spencer Mansion. But the character origin in Dead by Daylight is slightly different. As it reads here, a child prodigy, she graduated at 18 as a rookie police officer and part of the STARS Bravo team and was dispatched. She eventually did go into the Arclave research facilities, very similar to the events of Resident Evil 0, explored an abandoned train and discovered monsters, mutated animals, and then eventually to the Umbrella Corporation facility with even more stuff, desperate to find her other members of Bravo team. She followed their disembodied voices into a mysterious black fog that seemed to appear from nowhere. As Rebecca pushed through the heaving fog, she suddenly heard menacing footfalls behind her and distinctly reached for her sidearm, and her holster is empty, weapons gone. As she turned and heard a guttural roar and quickly evaded a massive club-like weapon. Clambering to her feet, she rushed toward a flickering light in the darkness. The flickering light and fog that pops up, honestly kind of indicates here that she ended up going into the fog in the Umbrella Corporation facility, and that was somewhat caused probably by Umbrella to some degree. So in this case, instead of the canon where she ends up going to the Spencer Mansion, she disappears in the Umbrella Corporation facility, which means she never even made it to the Spencer Mansion. Unfortunately for Chris, it's just a skin in the Dead by Daylight, or in the Dead by Daylight story. There is no origin story that we know of, as it's just a legendary skin for Leon S. Kennedy. The other character with a different origin is Ada Wong. Ada Wong's character info shows her in the events of Resident Evil 2 showing up in the RPD office, as well as the laboratory that's underneath and the sewers, working with Leon S. Kennedy to escape Raccoon City. You never actually see her escape, however, she does end up escaping in Resident Evil as she shows up in the next few chapters of Resident Evil 4, showing that she is working for Wesker, but as a triple agent for even a third company, not Umbrella, not Wesker, but another company, which the events unfold correctly with that. In Dead by Daylight, Ada Wong, as, very mysterious, as her real name is even a mystery, which is also true to the Resident Evil canon, indicating that she's a corporate spy working for Umbrella, loyal to Albert Wesker, double agents, whichever, and also seemed to be looking for the Las Plagas parasite, which is similar to what the Resident Evil canon storyline is. In this particular story, though, an origin for Dead by Daylight, while she was investigating, she was captured and nearly killed in a ritual sacrifice, but in the end she escaped and was never seen again. So in the events for this, she actually did get captured while investigating in the village, very similar to the other police officers that tragically died during the events with Leon S. Kennedy. She wasn't actually killed during the ritual sacrifice, but who knows, maybe she was, and that's what caused her to actually fall within the fog. And just because it's related, let's look at Leon S. Kennedy's origin, which with this one it's not much to it. And it even shows that Leon didn't even make it for the Las Plagas parasite. As he investigated a biohazard that ravaged Raccoon City, he infiltrated an abandoned Umbrella Corporation laboratory, where just an unexpected black fall led him astray, which is what caused him to be in Dead by Daylight. So in the events here, Ada Wong was the only one that was actually in the Las Plagas investigation, and no daughter of the president was even investigated or looking to be captured or kidnapped or saved. And thirdly, Albert Wesker, his storyline actually starts in the events of Resident Evil 1, which actually is somewhat affected in Resident Evil 0. He was the leader of the Alpha team that included Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, and a few others. In this particular canon for Resident Evil, he ended up actually dying towards the events of the ending of Resident Evil 1, either by getting killed by the Tyrant, getting killed by one of the monsters in the machine room. Depending on which one you select will determine that ending. However, as a long story short, he ended up surviving the events of Resident Evil 1. In Resident Evil 5, we find Albert Wesker actually in the traditional getup that you see him in Dead by Daylight, trying to find probable and prime candidates for Ouroboros, believing that the best way to do that was to unleash Ouroboros to the world, and for them to actually destroy and kill who was not qualified or didn't meet the standards of what Ouroboros was required. Fortunately, the events of Resident Evil 5 caused him to actually die in a volcano through the efforts of Chris Redfield and Sheva Elmore, as they were the BSAA agents investigating in the Ouroboros strain that was in Africa. Chris Redfield, the boulder-punching gentleman that he is, ended up pulling the last death of Albert Wesker by pushing him into the lava with a final kill shot of a rocket launcher blowing him up in the middle of lava. The Dead by Daylight strain is a little bit different in the character origins. Wesker began to put his action in Africa, but he was confronted by BSAA in a hangar stocked with missiles carrying Ouroboros. Determined to be at the vanguard of evolution, he made himself a test subject, exposing himself to Ouroboros, which is very true. It is a strain that you see that comes out of his hands and is actually shown in what causes his dashing. But as he felt the cells change, a strange black fog seeped into the hangar and filled his vision. When the fog dissipated, he found himself in another world. So even before the events of the volcano, he was actually found with the black fog in the hangar in Fort Ouroboros that caused him to come into the Dead by Daylight trials. Character models and skins. As we look at the different characters in Dead by Daylight, we look at the different models that are shown. Rebecca Chambers is the first one, with her traditional medic garment from Resident Evil 0 as well as Resident Evil. She actually has the same getup. The only exception is that the original getup for Resident Evil 1 had her bandana, which she does not have. In Resident Evil 0, she actually ended up not having that bandana as well, but I believe behind the scenes it was indicated that the bandana came from Billy Cohen that was given to her. However, that has yet to be verified. Things to note is she doesn't have a holster that they indicate, but she should, as she probably just dropped it when she came into Dead by Daylight. The other thing, too, is you'll notice the rescue insignia and icon on the back is actually a little different versus Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1. The STARS Raccoon City Police Department emblem is seen on her sleeve, but the rescue icon on the back technically has a cross on it. Now, the reason why the cross was taken and removed is because the medic cross that is used throughout real life is actually something that can't be copyrighted and can't really be used in gaming formats, at least for most laws and places. So this was actually removed to just include a red rescue text, which is what you're seeing in the back. This model a lot of times is going to basically be imported from Resident Evil 5. As Resident Evil 0, 0 HD, Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 1 HD, and Resident Evil the GameCube edition, she actually does have the cross that's included here. But in Resident Evil 5, during a fight scene or during the mercenaries, you can actually play as Rebecca, and it does show the same model there without the cross. So there's a good chance that this model was actually imported from Resident Evil 5. If you look at Resident Evil Mercenaries on the 3DS, it actually has a third variation, just to note, which has actually a star instead. Other than that, there's nothing major to note, and of course this is just the same uniform that was originally introduced first in the Resident Evil GameCube version, for the exception of the cross. Other things we can make note of is the alternative skin that was included, which has the cowgirl outfit. The nice thing is the cowgirl outfit was introduced in Resident Evil 0, usually for the GameCube version, I believe as an alternative skin or attire that you can wear as a special effects. In the HD version, it actually looks exactly the same with the exception of the cowboy hat, which is on her back, which was a nice inclusion from the Dead by Daylight team, as this isn't shown anywhere in Resident Evil 0. Other things we can hope that they include in future skins is the prototype version of STARS, the Resident Evil 1 uniform with the bandana with slight variations on the rest of the attire. The sportswear outfit, which is actually the RPD basketball skin, which, you know, Albert Wesker actually had a picture of that was shown in Resident Evil 2, but in Resident Evil 0 HD you can actually change to that outfit. The Capcom cheerleader outfit, as well as the nurse's outfit and leather outfit that's also included with that. Just to note, the nurse's outfit for Resident Evil 0 was actually also in Mercenaries, which for the 3DS, which you could play, and Mercenaries for Resident Evil 5. The other thing too that was mentioned is the actual Wesker version or Wesker mode of the Resident Evil 0 game, which was fun because Billy Cohen was replaced with Albert Wesker. Of course, the voice lines is the same. However, Wesker is actually there controlling Rebecca, as she is shown in the getup similar to Jill Valentine's getup in Resident Evil 5, with the controlling mechanism on her chest, which is the same thing for Rebecca. We're not sure if these things will come out in the future, but in behavior, it would be great if they would include that as future outfits for Rebecca and would give the game even more flair. Next person to be included is Ada Wong. Ada Wong's model in the basic form, if you take off the undercover espionage, is just her red dress with a boudoir and a holster for her handgun. This has actually been first somewhat introduced in Resident Evil 2 when she was introduced as a character. However, it wasn't super specific and there were some variations on the outfit. For her outfit here, it looks like she more or less was imported from the outfit that was shown in Resident Evil 2 the remake. In Resident Evil 2 the remake, the dress is a little bit smaller and does show her little boudoir underneath a little bit more, as well as the holster and the gun that she carries around with her flat shoes that she has included. The undercover espionage outfit is actually the outfit that was introduced in Resident Evil 2 Remake, as that is what she was introduced as when she first met Leon S. Kennedy, which would make sense since Leon S. Kennedy here as a character more or less had the model that is imported from Resident Evil 2 Remake. This was kind of cool as it had the trench coat all kind of buttoned up, showing that she had a badge from the FBI. She mentioned she was from the FBI, with an underlayer and also sunglasses, even though it was dark out, with gloves. And this was kind of her in the beginning and wasn't really planning on getting close with Leon in the Resident Evil 2 Remake until later events kind of showed different. The last two major outfits that's actually shown, or models that was imported, is actually going to be related to Albert Wesker as the killer. When you see Albert Wesker introduced in Dead by Daylight, he's actually showing the same type of leather-type bodysuit that he has from Resident Evil 5, with the long coat, gloves, and also the same material on the inside with the big belt buckle and the iconic glasses. Even though the glasses are pretty thin, I believe the original set of glasses weren't as thin. However, I mean, you can only get close to it so much, but the same hair color, same look, and yes, the face variation of it, with a typical espionage or tactical type of knife that is used to swipe folks as it happens. In Resident Evil 5, he starts with a coat, but then gets rid of the coat eventually when all he's using is the bodysuit until Ouroboros actually ends up taking over and ends up sprouting even past that, where he ends up just wearing pants and no upper body suit. His other character customization is actually his original STARS uniform outfit, which is actually pretty close to what was introduced in Resident Evil 1 for what materials they could show. Most likely this was imported from Resident Evil 1, the GameCube version, or remake, HD remake, as it shows the STARS uniform with the STARS emblem on his sleeve. He has his radio on the front, which is connected to an earpiece. The same glasses, same hair, blue, and a utility vest that's included around the top and front. And also his tactical pants with a holster with, of course, no weapons included, with stars on the back. This is similar to the character customization skin for Leon S. Kennedy, where you can actually turn into Chris with his traditional garb by actually choosing that particular skin. Most likely this was imported from the same source, as if you look at Chris Redfield, he has a very similar getup with his little utility belt on the front, which is actually green. He's got his additional military belt there, as well as a holster and his STARS RPD emblem on this. Other characters that were included in this DLC skin was Carlos Oliveira. Carlos Oliveira was actually introduced, at least in this particular getup and hair form that he has, from the RE2 remake, with the Umbrella Special Forces emblem, and then the rest is just a utility vest, holster, and pants that's included. This isn't the traditional Carlos Oliveira, which they actually did include in remake as an alternative DLC. However, this is exactly from the RE2 remake import. The other thing they included was also Sheva Alomor from Resident Evil 5. In her getup, it's very similar, the same, where she has the same type of tattoo, which means hero. The same purple sleeveless kind of shirt, the same type of military leather belt, holsters, and same green pants. And she actually looks very similar in the way that she looks visually, which is pretty great. The other two things that were included, which was pretty awesome, it would be nice if they included this as a legendary skin to actually show Chris. Felix Richter actually has a BSAA soldier outfit that's included. That's got the BSAA emblem and also the green shirt that he carries on there with the big, huge knife that's included on the back. In addition to that, Jill does have her STARS uniform finally included into the game. This is, of course, the RE3 remake version, as it does have kind of a similar feel and look of the shirt with stars on the front and on the sleeve. Her typical shoulder pad protection with her gun and clip holsters there, as well as the military belt and holster in her pants, as well as having a beret that has the star's emblem on it. This is also included as a cosplay for Fang Ming, which they also included as well for her. So now with Fang Ming, you can actually wear the same outfit as the RPD star's favorite of Jill Valentine. Other legendary skins that have been included, at least in the killer space, is for Legion. Legion actually has a unique skin that's included, which is known as Hunk. Hunk, who is actually introduced in Resident Evil 2, indicated as dead, was actually a special mode that you could get for the original game playthrough. Of course, Tofu was probably the other one that came up in that special playthrough afterwards, and it would be really cool if they included a Tofu mode, which they did in the RE2 remake. This model and version shows very much so that it's Hunk from Resident Evil 2 Remake, as it shows the traditional face gas mask, his helmet, his vest, and additional kind of packs that he has on his legs, his tactical pants, and also the ones in the back, as well as his radio. Also known as the Grim Reaper, Hunk has a very limited backstory. Sometimes folks indicate canon is basically from the What If scenario, which is included in Operation Raccoon City, but mostly is not admitted to it. But he is known as the Grim Reaper, as he just cannot die, as Hunk has lived through so many auspiciously tons of events and situations. Voice lines. All of the main voice lines that come included with Rebecca, Ada Wong, as well as Carlos and Sheva are included and imported from different parts of Resident Evil games. For Rebecca Chambers, she has a number of voice lines that are included in Dead by Daylight, which actually was imported from the original Resident Evil 1, as some of them indicate that she knows Chris very well, which is very true, as she had survived with him in the canon of Resident Evil 1. She indicates, "Be careful, Chris, I can handle myself, take care, Chris, it's me, Chris," are some of the highlights that are included with it, because Rebecca worked with Chris almost exclusively during the events of Resident Evil 1, and at the same time in Resident Evil 0, some of her voice lines were actually pulled, especially with the whole I can handle myself, as Rebecca had an issue of showing confidence to individuals as they looked at her and saw an 18-year-old or 19-year-old just newly rookie police officer as being a medic for the exclusive and intense STARS team. Ada Wong's voice lines look like most of them actually might have been custom, but most of these could have been pulled from the remake just as much as every other piece of content for her, as she has a lot of specific voice lines for Leon. What's also very interesting about Ada is that she actually has a voice line that kind of breaks the fourth wall, as it indicates that I hate playing other people's games, yet she is in a video game that is not Resident Evil, but is Dead by Daylight. She will indicate also that there is a Raccoon City reunion. However, she didn't see very many individuals, only Leon maybe caught a glimpse of Claire and maybe caught a glimpse of Sherry, as she worked almost exclusively with Leon. If we look at the other skins that are included, we do see that Leon's Carlos Oliveira legendary skin actually has some lobby voice lines that indicates he knows Jill and knows Jill very well, which in Resident Evil 3, which is where Carlos is actually introduced, he speaks a lot about Jill and how she needs to survive, as he was the one that helped and saved Jill by using the antivirus onto Jill to make sure that she was going to survive. So a lot of his voice lines are going to be included as part of that. If we look at Sheva Alamore, she also has particular lines that are included from Resident Evil 5, as she is one that always wants to be very independent and does very well, and proving herself as a partner to Chris, and also indicates a number of voice lines specifically to Chris that's included with this. She also indicates that she says hello to Jill, because she does actually end up also meeting with Jill briefly towards the end of the game, as Jill is part of the Resident Evil 5 storyline. The other major character that has particular voice lines in the game is going to be Albert Wesker, which is interesting with Albert Wesker because the majority of his voice lines looks like they were imported from Resident Evil 5. Very many lines and such lines as I'll only have 7 minutes to play with you is actually pulled directly from Resident Evil 5, as indicated and implied, as he does only have 7 minutes to spare with him in order to play with them in the actual temple with Jill Valentine versus Chris and Sheva, to say that he only has that amount of time to play with. He does say 10 minutes, but he also says 7 minutes as well, which is what was pulled for this. Albert Wesker's voice line, though, also kind of goes a little bit forward and being more personal with Chris Redfield. As you do kill Chris Redfield in a Mori, he'll say, "Time to die, Chris." He does love to fight and be angry with Chris, as Chris has always been the one that's kind of been competing with Albert Wesker, and not just stars, at least that's kind of insinuated, but basically in the events of Resident Evil 5 and Code Veronica, which is where they do initially meet before Resident Evil 5, to really show he is still alive. Charms for Project W. The nice thing is that if you purchase a lot of content for Project W, you're going to be introduced to a number of charms that are given to you. A lot of these are the blue, green, purple, and red vials, indicates different types of forms of viruses. The blue vial is indicated as the first breakthrough in bioorganic weaponry, which indicates that the sample's been made inert and all of these things. The blue virus is actually indicated as the original T virus. The inert definition also, just so you're aware, and the reason why they included in that, has been made to be indicated that this is chemically inactive and is just for show or display. So the blue virus we can attest to and identify as the original T virus. The green virus, which is also out of order versus the rest of the terms, is a further breakdown for what could cause the extreme mutation. But that's interesting as in the Resident Evil canon, because the green vial usually indicates as a T-virus, antivirus A+, at least in the movies, and also indicated that's included as an antivirus for even the G virus. In the case that was included for Resident Evil 2, that is shown from Birkin's creation, and in his particular case that was stolen or was being pulled from Hunk and his team. The purple vial indicates that it's a step above a previous breakthrough and could repair dead cells in a host, also made inert. This is indicated as going to be the G virus, as that is what is shown in Resident Evil 2, and also shown as the case that Birkin has, as well as what William Birkin actually includes and syringes himself with to turn into the monstrosity that he becomes. The final red vial that's included in Dead by Daylight as a charm, it's indicated as contents of the previous experiments causing terrifying mutations and raids to the dead. This is also made inert. Per the Resident Evil canon, most likely, which is not seen very often, is technically going to be the Nemesis T virus, which is included and used to create Nemesis, which we do actually have in Dead by Daylight as another killer. This, of course, is the Nemesis version that's included for Resident Evil 3 Remake, as the traditional Resident Evil Nemesis doesn't have teeth or a face like that and is somewhat different than the other Nemesis that's included.